Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salam. Hello. Peace to you all. Welcome to another episode in this continuing live stream series, Iran or Axis of Resistance versus the Epstein Empire, a collaboration with my good friends and colleagues from Resistance is Fertile, and usually Dave Yagubian. I'll give his apologies to all the listeners. He is a very busy professor with 4 classes whom he's neglected, his students of which he's neglected the last 2 weeks with all of the incredibly important and absorbing events going on in the Middle East. And he was generous to make time to be here for our first 5. I'm sure he will make a return at some point, but he has his duties, and we all know that we should do our duties, especially to our students for our for education. So he sends his regrets, but we do have the two co-hosts from Resistance is Fertile. Indi, how are you doing?
I'm good. Just woke up. Just started the fast for the day.
It's early in where you are, and it's great to see you again. I've been following your blog as much as I can. Wonderful stuff. Everyone go to indi.ca. And you can also follow him on Twitter, right, at indi.ca.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend that for anyone's health, but yes.
Well, yeah. I spend way too much time on there. But then we also have other co-hosts, Benji, Schoendorf, anti-imperialist psychologist. Benji, it's great to be with you.
Yeah, great to be with you once again, guys. I've been reading Indi stuff and wondering what I could add to the great stuff he's been writing, and I kind of gave up, but we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I had this idea, I make the thumbnails for these episodes, and I actually hid 6 Easter eggs in the thumbnail. And here's my idea. Every time one of you in the chat finds one of those Easter eggs and I validate it, at least 2 people in the chat make a donation to Samia Project. That's my idea for tonight. That's my brilliant creative idea. And if I have only one, that's the one. So
that's a great idea. I'm going to put the link again in the chat. I had a note at the very beginning at the top of the chat. So I'm going to renew the link so that it's fresh for everybody, and just remind everyone that we are in kind of the last days of Ramadan. And so the Ramadan campaign, which currently on their page, chuff.org, is at 385,970 pounds, British pounds sterling, and we would love to see that go up. I usually have said I would really like 10 people to join me, but I think if there's 6 Easter eggs, we need to be, and we want 2 for each Easter egg that's identified. We hope that with the incredibly intelligent, perspicacious, and dedicated and loyal commentators we have here on the chat, that this will not be a difficult task for you. You will get all 6, and that we will have at least 12 donors joining me in making a donation. In fact, we already have one. Naturally Occurring Flaws has done their homework with a 20-pound donation. So thank you so much for your generosity. As I said, we're coming to the last piece of Ramadan.
And I also want to say a word, because I noticed Red Kitty is here in the chat, and I already did that find Easter egg game elsewhere, and Red Kitty found 5 of the 6 at the first go. So please, Red Kitty, don't tell anybody what the Easter eggs in the thumbnail are, because every time someone finds one, I'm going to invite 2 of the folks in the chat to make a donation to the Samia Project Ramadan Fund. So it's going to be hard for you, Red Kitty, because nothing escapes your very precise, keen eye. That's right, keen eye.
That's right.
Yeah.
Keen eyes and keen minds. You know?
And one thing I'd recommend is hit up your mothers, hit up your mothers-in-law, hit up like the civilians in your life. If you're watching this, you're kind of in the know, but there's a lot of people who are perhaps not in the know, but they know up to a human level what's going on and would like to help. So hit them up as well.
Great message. Also, you know, while you're doing things like that, you can also hit the like button. It's very easy. You know, boost this on the algorithm. Share it to some of your friends, family, civilians in your life who you're trying to introduce maybe to the, you know, more risque side of the political spectrum. You know, we're a friendly bunch. You know, we welcome people. And that reminds me also to say that I noticed for the first time, I mean, I love when people have, you know, differences of opinion, discuss them, and they really get into, you know, improving their knowledge through the dialectical give and take and bring out new information and so forth. That's really, of course, a benefit and a wonderful thing. And sometimes we even have those on our panel. We have, you know, kind of a range of views within the anti-imperialist orbit. There's still plenty of things to discuss and, you know, differ on and improve in our thinking and analysis from one another in these comradely exchanges. But I did notice that there was some hostility back and forth between at least a couple of commentators. And I just would like to say, brothers, sisters, friends, comrades, you know, we're here for a good reason, that we want to learn, we want to have community. Let's treat each other with that kind of respect, even if we disagree, and be careful about our language and not making, you know, things personal in terms of you know, our disagreements or differences on positions. That's kind of what really destroys a mood and an atmosphere of solidarity and empathy. And I think actually, in point of fact, one of the things I hope we might talk about a little bit today is some of the remarks and comments we've seen, you know, by leadership in the West that really dismisses the humanity of others and just really is a politics of not just sadism, but really just, you know, it's like a lack of any kind of empathy for others. And this is something that I think distinguishes the axis of resistance. And we'll even see, even in military kind of questions, we've talked a lot about the kind of principle of reciprocity recently. But, you know, even so, I think if you had listened to Muhammad Marandi and others for the several months leading up to this terrible, illegal, aggressive imperialist war, he warned what the response might be. In fact, in some ways, he characterized it as very potentially indiscriminate and destructive. Like he said, well, look, you know, it'll just mean it's a regional war. It could be the end of like oil facilities in the Caucasus, the Gulf, and, you know, like he was really trying to, you know, kind of raise the temperature around what the costs could conceivably be ahead of the attack, so that people in the imperial core might dedicate themselves to, you know, spreading the word and raising the temperature domestically about, you know, how much they opposed any kind of imperialist attack on Iran. Now, some people may have thought, okay, he was bluffing. And, you know, clearly the leadership did not take this seriously. And we've talked about it before. It's very easy to see what might happen, very predictable. Yet Trump said, you know, 2 days in that he was surprised by, you know, the response in terms of attacking U.S. facilities and bases and personnel in the Gulf. Now, what I would say, however, is that despite that kind of language of warning beforehand to try and stop the war, that in actual point of fact, despite claims of Iran indiscriminately attacking, you know, its neighbors in the mainstream media characterization, it has been an extremely calibrated, and I would say still even restrained. Obviously, strategic deterrence is over. That kind of staged, we will just show you that we have capabilities, but we won't try and do damage, is gone. It's over, and there's a new, policy, a new leadership. But nonetheless, even within this, there has been, careful calibration, reason. They have not opened up, attacks on infrastructure or anything until the, Zio-imperialist, Zio-American, a coalition, the Epstein Empire, has actually started, this with the attack on and they still haven't done things like attacking, schools to slaughter civilians and so on. But if there has been an attack on a bank, then they have said, we are now warning you that, U.S. Connected financial institutions in the Gulf will now be a target. Where there has been, withdrawal of troops from their base and barracks and moved into civilian, neighborhoods, in hotels and so forth, they have, with targeted precision, attacked those facilities where they have intelligence and knowledge of the presence of U.S. troops, of CIA or Mossad agents and so forth. So in a way, we need to remember that while now there have been some attacks on civilian infrastructure, this has been calibrated closely as reciprocation when it has already been started by the aggressors who started the war and who now have opened up by doing all kinds of things like attacking the oil refinery that created that huge, terrible, kind of toxic cloud cover over Tehran as a kind of chemical attack. And the last thing I would say on this is some of the things that are being alleged, and this is something perhaps that's worth really taking up, some of the things that have been alleged about attacks from Iran that Iran has officially denied may indeed be false flag attacks that are designed and meant to turn U.S. allies that are concerned about the spreading war and the costs for them to actually have to either make a decision to support the war or be objects of U.S. and Israeli aggression themselves, right? So this is kind of the choice that they're facing, and so actually, there's something that I saw, and I don't know if you've seen it, but there was, in fact, actually a communique from Iran's Khatm al-Anbiya, right, which is the armed forces kind of official declaration on false flag attacks. And unfortunately, I have it only on, it came through, I think, on Telegram and is posted to me on a Signal chat. So I don't know if I can really display it. I'm not that good at the, my skills have advanced, but from such a rudimentary state that they haven't encompassed this, but I'll quickly read a little bit of it. Iran's Khatm al-Anbiya on false flag attacks. The enemy, defeated on the military battlefield and in political coalition building against Iran, has resorted to deceit and trickery and has copied Iran's Shahed 136 drone with a devilish plan attacking unjustified targets in the regional countries under the new name, the Lucas drone. The enemy's goal is to create distrust and accuse the Islamic Republic of Iran, ultimately causing discord and division between Iran and neighboring countries to undermine the defensive, legal, and legitimate actions of the Islamic Republic of Iran's armed forces. Governments and peoples of the region should know that the defensive doctrine of the Islamic Republic of Iran against the military aggressions of the United States and the Zionist regime is entirely legal and based on solid logic. The Islamic Republic of Iran, as it has repeatedly declared, only attacks the targets, centers, and interests of the United States and the Zionist regime, and wherever it targets, it takes responsibility by issuing an official statement and will be accountable for the consequences. And they give some examples of malicious attacks that have happened recently in Turkey, Kuwait, Iraq, and in recent days falsely attributed to the armed forces of the Islamic Republic of Iran were attacks in those places. And they conclude the intelligent reactions of the country's authorities to these deceptive and devilish moves will suffocate this conspiracy in its infancy, and being deceived by the devil and divisive positions will encourage its expansion. Therefore, it is necessary to trust each other, and by maintaining unity and cooperation, make the foreign aggressor enemy regret continuing these mischiefs. Okay, so I don't know if you had any thoughts about this issue and about like the arrests that we've heard reported in some of the countries of agents made known to the authorities in, I think it was the UAE in one case and maybe Qatar in the other. I'm forgetting which of the GCC countries, where there have been attempts to forestall and prevent around false flag attacks, and then in this case through diplomatic and political means to make aware this information. What thoughts do you guys have, Jim?
So first I wanted to start by saying you were talking about this little spat in the chat the last episode, and I inadvertently waded into it because I saw a general comment about Canada that I agreed with, and I wasn't following the chat very closely, and I said 100% to that comment, but I didn't realize I was actually stepping inside into a spat between two people in the chat. So I really regret having stepped in that way, and it might have looked as though I was taking sides in this particular conflict. I was just unaware of it, so my apologies if I give any other sign. I've seen two more people actually saying they had donated. In the private chat, I sent you the link where people can have a look at the picture if they want to find the Easter eggs, because it's not easy to see the thumbnail, of course, now that you are into the YouTube show. So I don't know if you can send it, because no one else except you can send URLs. And
okay, so is that right? Okay,
yeah,
so
I'm in the private chat, so that will take you to our Substack, and you will just see the picture of the thing very clearly.
Well, that's a good reminder that people should go to Resistance is Fertile podcast
and subscribe. It's 100% free, and you get all content all the time. And yeah. The only good thing you don't get on Resistance is Fertile is Indi's writing. You'll get some of my new writing, but that's like, anyway. Someone in the chat said something really, really smart. He said, I was seeing this thing, like those drones, those Shaheeds have totally changed the face of modern war, right? And it's really, it's beautiful in a way that the Shahed was given to Russia to reverse engineer by the Iranians. And I think it's a compliment of the vice to virtue or something. Imitation is the most sincere of all compliments. And the US has now produced its own version of the Shahed. I forget what it's called, but they were kind enough, Lucas. They were kind enough to announce Lucas before using them for their false flags in Gulf satrapies. So that's a comment from the chat. I'm not sure from whom, but it's a very, very perceptive comment. And I'll pass it over to Indi, who's been following this thing with incredible
incredible neglect of my children. I've been following this thing. So what they're talking about here is that the Iranian Shahed 136, which I think is the older model, that's someone's called it the Maxim gun of the modern era, but I think if you're perhaps a bit more modern, we could say it's the AK-47 of the modern era. That sort of basic template, I think they call it the Flying Dorito. It's like basically a triangle shape, and that's been copied by everyone directly by Russia into the Geran, and then America has copied it, I think, through interception as the Lucas, which of course, the Lucas comes with the additional feature of it remodels someone's kitchen in Bethesda every time you purchase one. But so this is the basic sort of template of a suicide drone. And if I'm correct, Shahed is like Martyr. So this is it doesn't carry a huge warhead per se, but it flies very low, and in swarms it's effectively unstoppable, and especially ballistic missile systems can't stop it. So this has really changed the game of modern warfare. Now, in terms of the information war, what the Al-Anbiya spokesman, I think his name is Folkria something, I forget his name, but what he's saying is correct, which is that Iran takes accountability for everything it does. And some people contact me being like, there's so much information, I don't know what to trust. I'm like, well, you can trust Iran. Like the resistance has never lied to me, whereas the empire has always lied to me, even when it's telling the truth. And it is a fire hose of information, but it's mainly on Telegram. You can follow Photros Resistance for direct Iranian stuff, or the Resistance News Network, and then also be aware that in your country, some of this information may be illegal or compromising. But they do release consistent statements about exactly what they're hitting and also what they're not hitting. So I think what he's referring to is largely the hits in Oman, which have been quite picturesque, but they're saying we didn't do that. Those are oil facilities in Oman. I think there are also hits in Saudi that they've disavowed, though they are hitting the Saudi military bases as well. And I honestly don't think the information space is that muddied. You just have to step out of the stream that you're used to. The resistance stuff is very clear. For example, and if you're wondering how to process this information, again, as we keep repeating, look up Basil Al-Araj's 7 points. And he says, this is an information warfare. Don't recirculate the enemy's propaganda. They will often say that someone has been killed, or that this has happened, or that this loss has happened, and then that will spread like wildfire. You can honestly just ignore it. And I personally find that much better for my mental health. I mean, right now, there's people are saying that, oh, Netanyahu has been killed or whatever. I actually don't care. I mean, I think one Zionist is another Zionist. But until the resistance says something about it, I don't think about it. And you can actually do that. Iran is issuing very good information there, and interestingly, they're appearing on CNN, and their Araghchi and the foreign minister is excellent, and they are actually communicating in English, many of them. And actually, the Al-Anbiya spokesman, I've heard him communicate in Hebrew and English. So there is information out there. You have to make some effort to step outside of the mainstream media that you're used to. But I would encourage you to step outside of that, because they have been laundering genocide for at least 2 years, and they've been lying to you before that. And whatever nuggets of truth you can get from there are just swimming in mountains of blood. And I would leave that stuff alone entirely.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm pretty confident that most of this audience is looking to alternative sources, but it doesn't mean people are finding some of these like Iranian official accounts. And so I do think, you have to have a heads up for Arya Jai and a few other people who retweet some of these, and then you can find, go back to the sources that they're retweeting from and follow, directly. I would say Ali Larijani is quite a fun follow. Okay. Araghchi's been really good on camera, and, we used his arch little sidewise glance, for the beautiful thumbnail that Benji designed, and that has, just to remind you, some little nuggets, Easter eggs to find. And if you find one, post in the chat so that 2 people, can step up and volunteer to make a donation to the Samir Project Ramadan campaign. But I would say Araghchi has been good on camera, and he's got this winning kind of personality. Larijani is a troll. I mean, he has got a vicious sense of humor, and he puts it in writing, and it's out there. And so that's a good follow, and you'll find out a lot of what is the kind of political side of the security class, thinking. He's out there basically trying to counter a lot of the worst of the propaganda and articulate, Iranian government sorts of positions. But he does it in pretty fun way. I think you'll enjoy his X account.
Yeah, and I think the propaganda game has gotten a bit easy, to be honest, because now Trump is coming out and saying, "Oh, we've destroyed 100% of Iran's military," while everybody else can see. I mean, what are you gonna do? You're gonna destroy like 110% next? Like Iran's gonna start bombing itself? Like, why? If you destroyed 100%, then why are you sending troops in? I don't know. They're not. And on the Western side, they're sending this like AI slop now, just absolute slop. Or they're showing pictures of people sort of inside their military machine, but not doing anything outside, and then they just recircle the same 4 videos of blowing up like an inflatable missile launcher. The propaganda is very weak on that side, which is surprising because that's usually been their strong point. I think that's the last bastion of manufacturing to fall. They cannot manufacture consent anymore either.
That's right. I mean, I think you know, at a certain point, the gap, like what makes propaganda. Well, I mean, there are different theories of propaganda, and you know, maybe Benji actually knows something about that kind of psychological literature, which is really interesting and related to the whole marketing. What was that, Edward Bernays, you know, and others who weaponized Freudian psychology as part of U.S. deep state as well as capitalist consumer marketing. Talk about like the two sides of, you know, the devil, basically, bringing those two together. So there are different ways. And of course, you know, we remember Nazi propaganda. Goebbels said, you know, you just tell the big lie and people say it over and over again and people believe it. I think what has made, you know, the propaganda war more effective for the, you know, Epstein Empire or Zio-American empire was that they could take something that was somewhat close to resembling aspects of reality and then kind of twist it so that there was, you know, ways in which your own sense of reality could be molded and shaped in a particular direction. And that was especially effective with the so-called kind of compatible left, you know, what we would think of as the liberal left, the compatible left, the left that, you know, critiqued aspects of capitalist society, usually wasn't so good on imperialism, you know, but was, you know, critical of policy, avowedly anti-fascist, but also were not pro, you know, actually existing, you know, socialist or communist governments and projects in the world. So it was all a kind of theoretical thing. And I recommend everybody go check out Gabriel Rockhill's wonderful new contribution in a 3-part series, the first volume of which is out, Who Paid the Pipers of Western Marxism, but it's part of a 3-part series called the, you know, information, you know, the world, what is it? It's the World War. It's the Information World War, I think. I can't remember the exact subtitle. It's something like that. But there will be other volumes, and he's done a lot to kind of expose that. But I think the problem now is that those techniques don't work when the gap with reality has widened so far that it's very difficult when you have Pete Hegseth talking about how, you know, projecting the fear and cowardice of Zio-American leadership, Epstein Empire, the Epstein class, that all the Iranian top leadership is cowering away in bunkers. You know, he's saying this to brag, and on the, you know, split screen, when your own media cannot, you know, restrain itself from showing what a fool you are. I mean, I think that shows that the information game, you know, the information war is starting to really be lost. And if you can show simultaneously something that's falsifying these bombastic and ridiculous statements by high government officials leading this war, that at the very same time they're all out in public with millions of other people celebrating Al-Quds Day, it really, I don't think it's very easy, you know, to win that.
And that's in a way that American officials cannot do. They cannot walk among their people like that. Many of the officials in the Trump government, or sorry, Trump regime, have started basically moving into military bases. These are people that fear their own people. Whereas you can see, it's I actually find it shocking, but the foreign minister, the head of the judiciary, the president, Larijani, are just walking in the street. I God hope they have security, but I didn't see any. They're just walking in the street.
I love that. Yeah. So the first Easter egg has been found, you know, like somebody noticed that Milikovsky had 6 fingers. And, as I said in the chat, don't laugh. Who wouldn't want 6 fingers? Plus, those 6 fingers were promised to him 3,000 years ago. So, yeah, so that's the first Easter egg. Congratulations, guys. Let's see if we can have 2 of you step up to the plate and make a 6-fingered donation to the Samir Project Ramadan Appeal. Adnan, you touched on something really interesting there. You talked about how in the first quarter of the 20th century, one of Freud's nephews, Edward Bernays, had used Freud's theories to sell stuff, mostly to Western people, to the American public, right? And Freud is famous for having suggested that all of our psychic life revolved around sexuality, repressed sexual desires, and all the rest of it. And so what did his nephew do? Well, he basically used sex and also male violence, that is the royal way to getting the girl at the end of the day, to sex, as the 2 pillars of a lot of US advertising, right? But there was a little fly in this particular ideological ointment, because where Freud and psychoanalysis imagined that sexuality was the eternal basis of unconscious psychological life, well, let's just say that Marx actually trumped Freud, in the sense that the fact that sexuality was so appealing at this particular point in time was actually a function of very particular social conditions, like a society that had a sexually repressive form of religion as its main social glue for hundreds of years, and that suddenly started getting fracked by capitalism, especially settler colonial capitalism, which lives on fracking every human experience, every communal link, every traditional way of people to relate to one another, to be a community together, right? So sex, because it was repressed, became something that was attractive. Also, the beginnings of industrial life, appliances gave people more time, and you are still talking about a genocidal settler society where literally people were encouraged to go out there and hunt indigenous folks to succeed. So you see those 2 pillars that they imagine to be eternal were actually extremely historically determined by processes that are better understood by the historical materialist method than this idea that, at the heart of every single human individual psyche lies repressed sexuality, and it's been like this and will be for all time. And what's happening today? Well, they're stuck on this. So you see their propaganda, their AI slop is all about, sexy female bodies. Come. Did you see the new campaign, Come and I Want You for the US Army? It's all a bunch of bimbos. It makes me think of this meme I saw on Twitter today. You see, and it says like, archaeological excavations in Dubai in 200 years, and you see a skeleton and those enormous silicone lips and enormous also mammary glands, and basically, but all their propaganda, and it was the same also during the 4K genocide, is sexual, is sexualized, and Pete Hegseth is playing old Western cowboy films. We're going to smoke them all. We're going to come into this saloon and shoot everybody. And it's like your dollar bargain shop Clint Eastwood, kick them we don't fight fair, kick them when they're down, make my day punk, and all that nonsense. And on the other side, nobody cares. Nobody is inspired by, a scantily clad women that you get access to once you have killed 174 primary age schoolgirls in the middle of Tehran or what have you. People are not, and you see the AI that is produced by the resistance is so much more powerful because it speaks to our common humanity. It speaks to that instinct that is at the heart of what it is to be human, to recognize common humanity in the other, to just, you don't grant it because we all have it. You either recognize it and you're human, or you don't and you're a effing demon, is the truth of the matter. And so they base all their propaganda on this, on dignity, on regaining humanity by the principle of reciprocity. You thought you could turn me into a non-human because you had this, historically accidental monopoly on technology and scientific knowledge. Well, you know what? You've lost it. It's called the internet. It's not just for porn. Unlike what you imagine, the internet is for sharing the common inheritance of humanity, which is the knowledge that we all share. And they use this knowledge to say, to just in action, not in words, not in bluster, turn themselves into equal humans. And that's where the reciprocity comes in. That's where, just by standing up and saying, you do this to me, I do the same to you. You do this to my banks, I'll do the same to your banks. Oh, and by the way, all your data centers, they were very nice, but they've gone. And even that, did you see the person hunt, the human person hunt? They've started hunting all the leaders of the genocidal entity, and not just the leaders, the pilots, everybody. And they send precision drones to the actual homes of these demons, right? And it must be absolute pandemonium in the colony because these people really imagined they were so superior that they could never be touched in their homes the way they have been massacring the to them non-humans in their homes. And this is what we're seeing. And it, and they cling to their own recipes. Well, let's throw OnlyFans models at them. Let's use OnlyFans models to agitate the Iranian opposition. Let's use OnlyFans models to get Americans to join. And then you see the recruiters going to the black areas of urban America and people making videos going, get out of here. This is a crackers war. This is a white man's war. We're not coming to your war. Go get the hell out of here. So yeah, this tells us a lot about the illusions and the delusions of the Western mind, and even that obsession with sex that we owe to Freud was just an historical accident. Now that anybody can have whatever sex they want in the West, we know that, it doesn't fill your soul, it doesn't fill your heart. It can be fun, just like, I don't know what, tiddlywink or playing, what do people play? Basketball can be fun, but it's not the be-all and end-all of life. But they just can't get it, can they?
No, and I think they have great difficulty understanding a different culture that might operate on different paradigms. We keep seeing this. I mean, we could talk about that for a very long time. But I do want to bring in a friend, comrade, former of guerrilla history, a regular on Tanky Group Therapy, activist on environment and indigenous issues, documentarian, Mikey. You know him on Twitter at Karaoke Computer. Welcome, comrade. It's great to see you.
It's great. I was trying to arrange, and I'm still going to arrange for Mikey to come and speak to us on Resistance is Fertile, but you brought him to us as a surprise. Beautiful.
Yeah, well,
yeah. I've been following you. Victims of Capitalism Memorial Fund.
Best handle on Twitter.
Me. Yeah, thank you.
That's right.
Yeah, I love
Mikey,
following your guys' work too. Doing great, and I'm glad Benji brought up both data centers and the
Yes.
kind of sick, uniquely, I guess, Western sickness where sex is everywhere, but intimacy is almost completely absent, and there's like no social cohesion, because I think those are key features to this Epstein Empire, which I don't know if I'm trying to make fetch happen here, but I've been taking to calling it the United States of Epstein. One, because I like the acronym that it makes, the USE. The fact that a lot of the member states of this kind of geopolitical arrangement are client states, right? They're basically just tools for the big empire, and also the fact that it encompasses both Zionism and the American project, the capitalist project. And yeah, and I think because I like Epstein regime and the Epstein class, but I think we need to think of this in terms of nation states, because there's kind of economic and political arrangements that these states hold that have a kind of shared value system and a shared broader political project of perpetuating capitalism, expanding the imperial project as far as it will go. And so yeah, I want to get back to kind of like the sickness within the USE, but also picking up off of data centers, the destruction of data centers, because I think that's something that I've been quite interested in the past 72 hours or so, because I think we should be talking about it more, because it is I think one of the last major frontiers of capital before collapse, right? Because like finance capital, it got into futures and then betting on the bets and then betting on the bets on the bets, right? But now we're at the point where this new asset bubble isn't even really in the realm of the future of the real world. It's not even a part of any reality, right? It's completely not even an augmented reality. This kind of like gross, ugly, weird simulacrum of reality. That all of this AI slop that is easy enough to fool an average person, and it's getting better, right? Where it's even fooled me a couple times, but it's distorting our current reality as well, right? And it's gobbling up water, and this data center expansion, the data centers that require so much water to manage the incredible loads that this new AI market is demanding. A lot of these have to be built natively in the places where they want to have them. So a lot of this has to do with data security, right? You can't just even these colonial dependencies, they want to have sovereignty over their data. So in order for a large company like Meta or Oracle or OpenAI to open a data center in a place like Dubai or in Saudi Arabia, they have to build the data centers there, and they also have to build out a lot of the additional infrastructure, including the backups, in that same country, so that country has sovereignty over their data. And so the fact that Iran is destroying these major emerging markets, I think that just as much as the closing of the Strait of Hormuz is going to accelerate towards the inevitable, kind of global economic recession that has been put off for years longer than it should have taken, right? But two, I think it's also going to, really force, I think, a complete realignment in terms of economic trajectory of these entire regions, because AI was supposed to be one of the major pivots for the region. And there was last year a kind of like a digital AI summit where Trump came to the Gulf countries, and it was called Pax Silica. And this is where a lot of major companies like OpenAI and Oracle and Meta all met up, and AWS, Amazon, met to basically map out the future infrastructure of the entire West Asian region, including these major data centers. And the biggest thing to come out of that was OpenAI's kind of like spearheading this. It's called Seagate in Abu Dhabi, and their plans were by 2030 to make this massive 5 gigawatt AI campus that would be second only to the United States and having the largest data center infrastructure in the world. And this was a $500 billion planned infrastructure project that was under construction, right before all of this happened. And so it is no coincidence that a lot of this infrastructure is under the recent target list that Iran just put out this morning, right? And so projects like that, I really don't think that they're going to be seen to fruition. I think it's gonna go the way of the NEOM. It's gonna be a completely abandoned project. And the thing about these types of infrastructural projects, they aren't like nation states, even though more and more often these corporations are resembling and accumulating the type of power and influence of a nation state. They can't just go to a regular like force majeure clause, because international law, any precedent that does exist in terms of defending corporations during a hot conflict like this one have ruled in the case of the defendant. The whatever country bombed that private infrastructure, they rule in the favor of the country if they can easily prove that corporate infrastructure was used by the enemy. And what's funny is the most, I think, relevant and influential legal precedent is this case from the Spanish American Civil War, where the Americans blew up submarine telecommunications cables that the British were using, and they ruled in favor of America. So, which is quite ironic. But also, yeah, and so also, in terms of regional law, where like OpenAI, if they can't finish this massive infrastructural project, they can't just claim force majeure for Abu Dhabi, because in their regional rulings, they have also ruled that basically, like, you knew what you were getting into when you signed a contract in a conflict heavy zone. so basically it's like, buyer beware when they enter these contracts. So potentially OpenAI could be on the hook for at least the $100 billion that they fronted for this project. So that, I mean, and that is all just a complete loss. They would completely lose their shirts or require a US bailout for that, and the US can definitely not afford that level of bailout in its current precarious financial state. So I think we should really start to pay more attention to Iran and the resistance fronts targeting of corporate infrastructure. And also one more thing about this particular topic, Meta has also been involved in this massive fiber optic cable connection project that basically is supposed to wrap around all of Africa. And they had completed basically every bit of it except for the Strait of Hormuz. And 17 pipelines of fiber optic cable that provide high-speed internet connection to the entire West Asian region, or particularly the Gulf Coast regions, they run under the Strait of Hormuz. And Meta actually had to stop construction of these pipelines, these submarine pipelines, a little while back, I think 2 years ago, because of a Ansar Allah attack on a boat that caused an anchor to carve open one of the pipelines, and so they had to stop construction for a while because it was too much of a liability and a safety issue for their workers. And so, that To Africa project is also another multi-billion-dollar project that is just dead in the water. But I mean, that is way more than the actual price tag, because that kind of internet infrastructure is supposed to kind of like build out what would eventually be a multi-trillion-dollar kind of infrastructural shift in the entire West Asian economy. And so I think this also opens up a lot of new alternative pathways in a post Ramadan war kind of future where like these abandoned projects could be picked up or rerouted into a new kind of like more multipolar world system, where the China's Belt and Road Initiative would extend out to these Gulf countries in like what would hopefully be kind of like a post-Israel, post Gulf dependency arrangement. So yeah, I think Iran is basically like leading. They're the vanguard, leading into a new possible future for not just that region, but for the entire world. And oh yeah, one more thing about this. I do think that, like, especially in the US imperial core, we worry a lot about the way that companies like Palantir are coordinating directly with state fascist organizations like ICE, and also our US military. And I think this also, these recent developments also kind of show that there are vulnerabilities to that level of direct coordination between a business and a government entity, and that they carry a lot of the financial liabilities of that level of financial commitment. And I think a lot of these evil companies like Alphabet and Meta are going to probably have to start reevaluating the degree to which they invest in the military industrial complex.
Yeah, these are really interesting points. Sorry, I just want to jump in. So just on a theoretical basis, Benji and I talk about artificial life versus natural life. So my working theory is that AI is nothing new, that corporations are legal people, and places like Sri Lanka, we were colonized by corporations. And to me, from my experience, AI began in 1602 with the first IPO, the VOC, or the Dutch East India Company. And these forms of artificial life, which I think it makes sense to analyze them this way, they have their own sort of reproductive capacity, which you call production. And as Benji was saying about the sexual thing, there was this moment in time where capitalist production matched human sexual reproduction. So you could get a job within the capitalist system and you could have children and raise them in a home. And what's happened since then is the gap between artificial production and our natural reproduction has shifted. And if you look at hyper-capitalist places like Korea or Japan, humans are not reproducing, only capital is producing. And what you have now is a battle between systems that want to prioritize the reproduction of this artificial life versus systems like communism, or what you have in Iran, where people say we have other priorities. We want to orient production towards human needs, towards human dignity. And we have a real, and the climate collapse is a symptom of this. You have something where the waste heat of capital of this other species is killing off natural life, which, to zoom out even further, has happened before. When photosynthetic life emerged, the reproduction of that form of life produced oxygen emissions that almost froze the earth. And so we're doing kind of the same thing in reverse by desecrating their graves and burning them. But it's important to understand that these emissions are coming from, so this war is a huge source of pollution, just massive pollution, not just what they've done to Gaza, but what they're putting in the air for all of us. And it's just a massive sort of like orgy of capitalist waste and capitalist energy use. And when Mikey ties this back to the data centers, that's fascinating. And when he talks about the legal aspect of that, now it's important to note that the Khamenei the Younger is saying that they're demanding not just ceasefire, they're demanding reparations.
Yes.
So in a world order, so he's talking about who got paid for what was damaged. Now, in a world order where power has shifted, Iran would be getting paid by Microsoft. Iran would be getting paid by Facebook. And I don't think people understand that that's how much stuff is shifting. In Sri Lanka, on the I guess the Indian side, now Modi, after like trying to like lick every boot in the Western world, is tweeting in Parsi because they're like, oh, we can't make dosa like without gas. No, I'm serious. The dosa places in Bangladesh to like India.
He said that the guy learned Farsi in 3 days flat. That beats Duolingo, my friend.
Yeah. I was shocked when I saw those, I have to say, his tweet in Farsi.
But you can see, like, in terms of, say, reparations, right? Things are shifting because it seems that whoever controls the Strait of Hormuz, that's your new petrodollar. It's that 20-mile stretch. And so that's a fascinating thought to think of like where the reparations would go, actually.
Yes. But you know what's interesting is that there's a reorientation. You know what's happening in some ways with the peeling back of this very atypical period created through extreme violence and colonization of Europe's takeoff, right? So this brief period in like human history of 300, 400, 500 years, however you want to kind of frame it and characterize it, where Europe and the West was dominant, and that is carried over into the 20th century with the U.S. kind of carrying forward, imperialist capitalism. That like as things start to get peeled back in this multipolar rebalancing, what is it that is returning? Is that tyranny of geography? Remember that military analyst who was saying, it's really so unfair. I mean, we can't really dominate this region. There's this tyranny of geography, and it's like, well, why do you think, in some ways, that human civilization is so old in a place? I mean, I've been noticing how often the Iranian political figures talk about, what do they think? I mean, Iran has got a 6,000-year history, and they keep, saying this. And in some sense, there's a kind of nationalist sort of pride, but it's also speaking to old world human development was based on the kinds of things India was saying, that capitalism, the first stages of capitalism weren't so far from nature, from natural kind of rhythms, the human body, birth rates, things like that. Things slowly changed and progressed. We're in a very different artificial world, but it's starting to collapse and fray. And what is the reset? The reset is going back to the fact that China for 4,000 years has been the dominant economic force, of production, of innovation in the world, and that other regions like the West Asia, have a long history of, development, and that global trade, ever since the Crusades, which was basically the way in which the Latin West tried to become part of the world system, but to do so on its own terms through violence rather than, other forms and ways and mechanisms of its development, had to deal with the tyranny of geography, because certain human cultures and civilizations built themselves around very crucial points, like the Bab el-Mandeb, like the, Sinai, connection between the Red Sea and the Nile Delta into the Mediterranean, like, the Strait of Hormuz, like, kind of the navigable, world system or a regional system that could be part of the world system of the Indian Ocean that connected East Africa, with, the western coasts of, India, and how to connect that back through the Malacca Straits. Okay, again, very important to get you into the southeast China, into the seas that connect you with China, right? This is like the world global system. It's a tyranny of geography. And so it's no wonder that the Yemenis, who have a 4,000 year, history as well, are located there. Ethiopia and Yemen. I mean, this is like, very important for connecting Africa into trade in the Indian Ocean. So now they're confronting the fact that Europe, the US, it developed in this different way through this different artificial mechanism of the use of violence. And now it's having to adjust to the fact that 10,000 miles away are the choke points. And they used to be able to control and dominate all these places with their chain of military bases. But what Iran is demonstrating and proving is that is a very fragile hold. If things change even a little bit, they can overthrow this whole system that's been built in this kind of, artificial architecture. And what you were saying is, again, why are they invested in these places? The artificial economy in artificial states, in places that have no strategic basis for, sustaining real life on any serious scale. There are these tiny places that are desertified. They won't exist in 2 more weeks if somebody doesn't, Iran will be humanitarian and say, we will let food, and bottled water in if we have to destroy your desalination. We will make sure you don't die. But the point is they are totally artificial, dependent on everything being exported. So, I think that's the artificial economy that is being threatened. And what I'm very excited by your suggestions, Mikey, that there might be some hints of a different kind of system being built, what that might look like. And, we do get a few little cool notes on this, that like the intelligence gap and the tech, we talked a little bit last time about Handala and the leaks, and that there's a cyber war. Iran is doing quite well in the cyber war. I mean, and maybe we should show this. I think this is what Benji was really talking about. Oh gosh, how do I go back to that tab? I think it's here. Oh yeah, there it is. Great. This is like in a kind of an intelligence coup, information war also being deployed. This is basically a list of war criminals who have bombed civilian areas. These are Israeli pilots, right? They're naming them. This is what the kids call doctors.
I'll give him a call.
Yeah,
Somebody should.
Don't call your representative. Call this number.
Like those pranksters, right? Who will call. Okay, so anyway.
So at another level, we're talking about, if you're talking about the information war, this is a message from Ashab al-Kaf, the Islamic resistance in Iraq. They said to avoid harm to our Kurdish people. Ashab al-Kaf.
The companions of the cave.
So the Islamic resistance in Iraq is not getting enough credit. They're actually doing a lot, but I'm just getting into their information networks. But they're saying to avoid harm to our Kurdish people and our good people, we advise those in charge of the Dedeman Hotel on Street 60 in the Kurdistan region to clear the hotel of the occupying forces, especially those who arrived this evening in a black vehicle by Friday morning. After that, the decision will be for the drones. We reiterate that the intelligence units of Ashab al-Kaf will pursue you wherever you hide. So, and there's been similar sort of notices that have gone out in the UAE and in the Gulf states, being like, get out of the hotels. We know what hotel you're in. And as I say, every rich man's house has a servant's entrance. Every busboy or worker in these hotels is we got Marines here. I don't think they have a good place to hide.
Well, actually, in fact, they did put out a declaration saying, basically it was see something, say something. It's like those campaigns where you're supposed to.
And if I'm running a hotel, man, there's no way I'm checking in like American soldiers. I'm like, I like my windows in the window. I like my doors on the door.
That's at the proprietor level. But think of all these people, oppressed workers and indentured labor in the kafala system. this is a
But
chance.
and it's
To inform on them, so like every, as you're saying, busboy, every room cleaner, there's a whole army of people who are discontented, who might easily be recruited into the Islamic Republic of Iran's intelligence network, right? They are on the ground, in these GCC countries in a way that I don't think anybody could imagine.
Yeah, and I want to repeat
and
that.
I think, oh, sorry. Yeah. And I'm trying to.
No, go ahead.
There's one thing that's happening. All these things are actually signs of the revenge of life over death, over dead stuff. Again, what's really changed in my analysis lately of the movement of the world, the movement of history, I owe to two major sources. So one is here tonight, and it's brother Indi, because he came up with this idea. I don't know if you invented it, but I had not seen it before, chancing upon your blog, that Marxist capital is natural history of the first artificial intelligence, a form of artificial life, going back to this idea that when corporations were given human rights, were given personhood, you could see all those companies were represented as kind of, mythological Greek figures and what have you. At that moment, what happened is it was the expression of the process of capitalism, which is literally at first to extract the most living thing in us, our labor force, and turning into something dead, i.e. profit, surplus value, money. And the process is universal. It aims to replace every living thing by dead stuff, by artificial stuff that is not powered by life. And the whole thing about AI is kind of a similar thing with added scam on top, if you like. The whole thing is a scam from the beginning because it's built on the philosophical categorical error that your metaphor is what it says it is. It's like, so Descartes imagined that we were all automatons because it was the high tech of his time. And then in the mid 20th century, they looked around and computers started appearing in our lives, and they went, oh, okay, so the human mind must be a computer, a metaphor, right? An image. And then because the human mind is a computer, and by the way, do you know what? You guys don't know this, but Chomsky's most effective and nefarious psyop on behalf of white empire wasn't his kind of, compatible left cod activism. It was actually his takedown of Skinner's behaviorism, who everybody believes was authoritarian, was training humans as animals. Not at all. It was really fine, very sophisticated epistemology of looking at the organism in constant interaction with their environment and how activity changes the environment, changes future activity, future behavior, which is really a dialectical view of constant relations between everything that is. So it's the closest that psychology got to a dialectical materialist account of human psychology. And Chomsky in 1959 really did a hatchet job, one of the most dishonest hatchet job on Skinner's verbal behavior. And then the whole field went into, oh no, it's actually inside your brain. It's all you have a generative grammar, innate, genetically determined grammar language module inside your brain. So it's all individual. And by the way, this module is why we should all be anarchists, because it's all the individual. And then you start looking inside of that thing as if thinking, as if spirituality, as if community, as if consciousness came from the inside, and then you go, oh, well, what's going on inside? Connections between neurons. Oh, I know what. We are going to model these connections with enough computing power, and then we're going to get to human intelligence, generative intelligence. It's complete nonsense. intelligence is an dialectical emergent property of living things in interaction with other living things and things that move much more slowly, like rocks and those kind of things. It's not contained inside anything. You have no ideas in your brain. You have no images in your brain. You have only brain cells in your brain. And so they go on this idea that if you have enough computing power, and they could actually use all the energy in the world to try and get this supercomputer, they will never get to generative intelligence. But they've sold it. Like, Sam Altman told us it was going to come in by mid-2025. And here, and people are starting to
coming,
actually...
bro.
It's coming, bro.
Just another $1 trillion, bro. It's coming.
Exactly right. Every corporation that has sacked workers to replace them by AI has lost money. Now they're trying to recoup it by rehiring the workers with lower wages, thereby, increasing proletarian rage in the people. But you see, all this is a process of trying to make pretend life out of dead stuff. Computer programs, computers are dead. They're like pieces of sand that you send electrical currents in. That's not life in any kind of sense. And what we're seeing is, and those guys actually made their war plans with AI. They literally went to ChatGPT or whoever other one, Anthropic or Misanthropic, I think it's called now.
And they're making their propaganda with like AI. And
and asked it in 2 days to come up with a bank of targets. And on the other side, you have humans. And you even see it on the internet. Like, did you see this guy is looking at all the satellite pictures of the entity, and he's doing TikTok videos here in this place at this exact coordinate 39.222. There's this thing, it looks exactly like this thing, and there's this other picture. It must be a THAAD. It must be a THAAD battery. Oh, by the way, we're talking about Easter eggs. 2 more were found, so please donate. It must be a THAAD battery. This could be a hint for the next Easter egg, by the way. And they've now shut down his account. But the beauty of it, you see, this is living people. Human intelligence is intelligence. This idea, this dooming idea that they will create a dystopia, that they will actually get an artificial intelligence that can even anticipate your thoughts, is nonsense, because we're human. So the minute we see the pattern that they are surveilling us with, we'll do something unexpected. And the AI will just, we'll just get off the rails. It's been proved now by a scientific paper that if you have one complete question with lots of prompt to an AI, you sort of get a okay answer. But if you ask a follow-up question, every time you ask a follow-up question, the accuracy of the answer falls by 15%. I'm sure when they did their war plans, they went, "Are you sure?" And so they asked the AI, "Are you sure this is going to work?" And then the AI started degrading a really bad answer to start with, because not a human answer. And now they've got this war plan where the only person in the world who believes it seems to be Trump, but the guy never believed anything except that his reflection in whatever people's reaction to his show is the most beautiful thing that you've ever seen in the world.
I think
there's the guy.
I think AI is very good for producing documents you don't want to write for someone who doesn't want to read them. So
they get it read by AI. Then they get AI to read the document.
And what's happening
who needs Beidou when you've got this guy, okay? So, you need targeting information to listen to this guy. China's Beidou system has got its kind of like low-tech dispersed mosaic, prototype being developed here, which is the 3 peoples of the world.
See it right here about the arrow battery air defense. He's
finding like
that is going to be right here. It's right there.
So I don't know. I hope people
here's
saw
another
this
photo
one.
He
This
posted
is one of the
confirming.
funniest
Look
things
how the sides are like a wall. It
I
opens
have
up,
seen.
just like right here.
This guy goes forensically through identifying what he thinks is a THAAD battery or a Patriot missile battery or arrow system, and he says, kind of here towards the end, is like, okay, Okay,
And maybe
so
you
you
can get
know,
some interceptions over here just to waste some more.
That
Benji,
is-
would you like
he's
video
even
post on the
suggesting
channel
that
later
maybe
on
you know
show
you
us if we
can direct
possibly
the
get this out to
missile
the Iranian
via Tel Aviv so that it'll waste even more, anti missile system strike, and then
So Iran knows all this stuff already. I think it was a U.S. general who
Yes,
said
of
we were
course.
surprised at the extent they tracked us, and not only tracked us, but our patterns of life, as in where they were going. So in that statement from the Iraqi resistance, they were saying we saw the car you arrived in. What's happening is that they're in a hostile area. Right? Iran is fighting in its land from amongst its own people. And these guys have been kicked out of their bases, which were segregated from the rest of the population, right? And now they're amidst a hostile population. So I think there are 30,000 troops there. They've had to go somewhere. What I've been saying since day one is the empire has been in retreat. The minute it ducked out of its bases, it's been in retreat. And what's happening now, I think, is a rout. They're losing all their fancy planes, whatever. Like I said, every rich man's house has a servant's entrance. Every fancy plane requires a big, dumb refueling tanker. And they've hit 5 of those on the ground in Saudi. They've hit, or they've hit them, or made 2 of them commit suicide over Iraq. Something. These guys are having health emergencies or whatever, questioning their lives. But they're having to pull further and further back. They don't have basing on the Gulf. That was never sustainable. They're losing the basing in Saudi. They're losing the basing in Israel. Then they pull back to Cyprus. They're talking about pulling back to Romania. They're just going to have to pull all the way back. And to understand Iran's goals, their Ghalibaf, their parliament speaker, he said there's been this cycle where we fight and then they regenerate through the Zionist colony. They fight and they regenerate. And he's saying we're stopping that cycle. So this is going to end when America is completely pushed out of the Gulf, which I will repeat, after they've lost in Vietnam, they've lost in Afghanistan, but I wouldn't say those were strategic defeats because they kept following the same strategy. After this, they will not be able to pursue the same strategy. They will not have the basing there. And at the same time, they themselves are pulling stuff out of South Korea. So they're preemptively losing any Pacific war because they're moving bad batteries
colonizing
over.
East Asia.
Yeah. And Iran is taking control. They're sanctioning. Now Iran is saying, basically, if you trade in yuan and you're not if you don't support the empire, you can trade your oil. And then even India, right? India is first off, shout out to everybody in Tamil Nadu and Kerala. But India at the center is pretty racist and Modi is pretty awful. But even Modi is yo, if these guys can't cook their dosa and rotis, the country's going to explode. So even even India is bound to the new boss of the Hormuz.
Yeah.
Hormuz.
Yeah. I'll say it again. Gaza was Stalingrad, and this is the Koks battle, and is going to Operation Bagration, which was the great Soviet counteroffensive that ended in Berlin. And we are seeing it, by the way, it's not Iran liberating Sudan. It's Sudan liberating itself thanks to the wind, to the headwind that the counteroffensive is giving. We're going to see the same in Korea that might reunite. We're going to see the same everywhere. And this counteroffensive is going to humble that empire to the place where there'll be nothing, its pride is going to crawl under a duck before you know it.
No, but the scary thing is they're taking it out on Cuba. So Cuba is getting it. So I think Brazil and people in that region have got to stand up and reassert some sovereignty. They can't just be America's backyard anymore.
And that's going to be Trump's. He thinks maybe it'll be his Grenada. Right? Ronald Reagan managed to get a victory by invading this tiny island nation, claiming that there were Cuban and Russian kind of activity. It was going communist and so on. And, after the spanking that the U.S. is taking militarily, strategically, economically, morally, you name it, it's a very comprehensive, defeat that is being developed through the Strait of Hormuz. They might, need something to, satisfy the bloodlust of the American empire and try and take it out, as you're saying, Indi, on a smaller target, and this is a chance and an opportunity for that region to, while the United States is tied down, and involved, just as they did with the pink tide in the mid-late 2000s, to extend the Bolivarian Revolution and to have left-wing governments come in when the United States was involved in Iraq and Afghanistan, these wars in West Asia. It was an opportunity for rebalancing within the Western Hemisphere for people's sovereignty and projects for, improving people's lives. So now is the time really to take action. But I do want to ask everybody to like the stream, share it. If you haven't liked it, you need to like it. And also, I think there were two more, Benji announced, two more of these Easter eggs found in the thumbnail.
So one was
Yeah, what were they?
one was the news, the hangman's news tie of Trump. And look at that tie more closely, if I may say. And another one was Abu Naranja's skin as an orange peel. So there are a few more. The others are kind of hiding in plain sight. And I want to see donations. I want to see donations for these Easter eggs. That's, our brothers and sisters in Gaza need our material help. It's, talking shit on the internet is great. Shit posting is brilliant. Showing them targets they already knew is brilliant, not because it's going to be intelligence for Iran, but because it shows like this is the most beautiful white person's redemption arc you could imagine. The guy is as white as you could ever get, and there he goes, Iran, go here, and by the way, go over Tel Aviv so you waste more of their patriots and tags and all that nonsense.
And I think we're seeing like resistance within the empire itself. Yes. And I think I want to be clear that just losing Israel, which I think they will do by 2027, as Hamas founder Yassin said, that's not enough. I think the USA has to go the way of the USSR, except they deserve it. And the United States has to be broken up. So people within the United States have to work on breaking that up. Obviously, it should go land back to the people that weren't raping it. Yeah. But the United States has to break up to the point that it's not, and that's a very delicate thing. But if you're in some state, you need to start forming honestly a Marxist militia and taking that state out of this wretched union. And I think when Americans see the amount of people the amount of soldiers they're actually losing in this war, and the injuries they're actually getting, and who's coming off of those many emergency flights flying out of the Middle East, and why they're not and doing regular service at their occupied base in Germany, and they see the actual cost of this war, because they've already seen who they're fighting it for, then I think you got to really start questioning what the United States is there for.
I think it's got a lot of people in Hawaii really questioning what the United States is illegally occupying this place for, right? Because their claim is always that they're here to protect us from places, from evil people like Iran and the DPRK and Russia and China. It's always China, 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 right?
But Hawaii was promised in the Quran. I read that.
So and people here are already kind of ripe for that kind of conversation in ways that they wouldn't have been just 5 years previous, because in 2021 there were these catastrophic jet fuel leaks at this place called Kapukaki, also known as Red Hill. And
check out the Guerrilla History episode with Mikey about it.
That's right. Yeah, that was a good one. So I was organizing a lot around getting those tanks shut down. These were fuel storage tanks that were built in World War II, right on top of our sole source aquifer that provides water for 500,000 people in Honolulu. And it's been leaking ever since then, for 80 years. And in 2021, 19,000 gallons leaked into the Navy's water supply. That also, it went mostly to military families, but also to the civilian water supply, and threatened our entire aquifer. And then 1 year later, in their attempts to repair the deteriorating facility in order to finally defuel it after we forced them to through organizing, they leaked 1,400 gallons of concentrated AFFF, which is PFAS, which is literally millions of times more toxic than jet fuel. And so, in our organizing around that, we were able to actually organize military families and to kind of helped them walk into a new political consciousness that made them vocally in support of the demilitarization and decolonization of Hawaii, which is really cool. And so I think like moments like this, I've already seen and had some conversations with people here who like they're constantly surprising me with what they're saying about Iran, and what they're not saying about Iran. Like I've seen so many people and had so many conversations with people who were just kind of like garden variety liberals or not like even remotely political people when they saw Iran's, hinting at certain basic demands. Everyone was like, that sounds eminently reasonable. Like, why are these people so reasonable? I thought they were, fanatics in this giant collective death cult, right? And I think, yeah, I think US empire kind of collapsing in on itself and out on everyone else, I think is really starting to show people what this political project has always been about. And I think this goes back to language and also patriarchy, and I think I'm going to take that in that order. Like I think so when I was organizing around Red Hill, I kind of wanted to kind of get people to kind of question the entire kind of like systems of knowledge that even shape our language, in order to kind of get people to viewing things at a system level, just how unconsciously we've kind of accepted US militarism, but also capitalism. And I think a perfect contrast is Native Hawaiian language, Olelo Hawaii. There's this there are Hawaiian proverbs called Olelo no Eau, and a really often repeated one is Ika Olelo no Keola, Ika Olelo no Kamake. And that means like in language there is life, in language there is death. And I think like language, it definitely reflects the system under which it is developed, right? So Native Hawaiian systems, like they had this ahupua'a system, this land tenure system that was literally kind of like made around the water. Like entire society was shaped around the ways that water flowed, and they understood on a deeply scientific level ecology, water coming from the mountains to the sea and recycling back, and they had a sustainable life there. And I think US empire capitalism has a kind of inverted system. And so in Hawaiian language, like there's literally hundreds of different words just for rain, the type of rain, the way that it falls, and the way that water flows into every aspect of life and language is really incredible. Like Ovai Koino is like, what is your name? But it's actually asking you, what waters are you from? Law is kanawai, wealth is vaivai, and that's why is water. And you look at the way that we talk in terms of the way that the resistance talks and the language that they use to describe revolution, right? Al-Aqsa flood, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. But when you look at the way that we talk in the US about capital, right? Income streams, diversified flows, are you liquid, right? Like I think just anything related to capital is tantamount to that which provides life itself, right, and sustains life itself. And so I think we're seeing the value system and the economic system that influences that type of language start to fall apart as well. And so now going into kind of like patriarchy, which I think United States of Epstein, it also has, it has the economic system, right? Like Epstein was all about finance capital, right? Like that's how he got super rich. Somehow this this idiot math teacher somehow lands this position in high finance, and then becomes one of the most connected business people in the world, right? And so we see that trajectory, his legacy. It was until very recently just being expanded through all the GCC countries, right? And that is being interrupted as well. But also the kind of political and social project of sexual domination, predation, and subjugation, right? That was Epstein's kind of life's work, is completely the just an unbroken line of the legacy of colonialism and capitalism, right? And we see this not just in terms of sexual subjugation, but also in terms of kind of like the basic foundations of intimacy with social reproduction before capitalism, right? And with literal, reproducing, right? And of the family, origins of the family, right? Talks about how the introduction of capitalism it takes away mother right and through male inheritance, and also subjects women to the only major type of dramatically unpaid but also most important labor of domestic care and raising the family, which under the nuclear family subjects women to a kind of permanent second class status. And so when we look at countering the the narrative about Iran being the worst place for women, and how we have to free all of Iran's women through woman life freedom, right? Like, of course there are contradictions, particularly with the woman question in Iran, but that's for Iran and Iranian women to fight for in a post-colonial oppressed post-colonial society, right? Where there is no existential threat presented by the USE, right? Because I mean, if we look at their Gulf neighbors, are they bastions of progressive feminism? Absolutely not, right? I mean, Benji pointed out kind of like the OnlyFans culture, but it goes way beyond this kind of, well, I mean, OnlyFans is also like it's that type of liberal feminism that advocates for it. It really kind of minimizes the insidious aspect of those platforms, right? Because just like in all other capitalist enterprises, there are very, very few success stories that come from these online platforms. The vast, like 99.99% of participants on OnlyFans are girls, young women who have, many of whom have just turned 18, who make dollars per month at a maximum, who have their bodies on there and oftentimes proliferated by their peers forever, right? It destroys thousands of lives on a consistent basis, and this is intimately tied to the U.S. military-industrial complex. If you look at any military base in any occupied country, you will see, if you are to map out the sexual assaults, the domestic abuse, the sex trafficking that happens in those countries, all of the hotspots are directly around the surrounding areas of military bases. Hawaii is also no exception. And with RIMPAC, the Rim of the Pacific Games, which happens every 2 years, it is the largest military games held on the entire planet, hosted by the United States, where all of its allied countries come to practice war on their own people, or staging invasions of Taiwan, or in this case Iran or the DPRK. Every time RIMPAC comes to town, sex trafficking and abuse rises exponentially. There's a spike that you only see at other events like the Super Bowl. So ending this kind of US domination like that, if you want like to actively participate in like women's liberation, it is not cooing Iran. It is eliminating US empire.
Yes, and by the way, they've taken some troops out of Okinawa, which is a boon for Okinawan indigenous women who have been subjected to all sorts of sexual abuse by the U.S. Marines stationed there.
Yeah, I think that's those Marines who are going to be human sacrifice to Raytheon and Lockheed Martin on the ritual island of Karg, I guess.
Yeah, and someone in the chat was saying, "Oh, but they're just going to send ground troops to Iran," and look at Araxi said, "Yeah,
we're waiting. We're waiting.
We're waiting." But you said
Iran
something
actually...
Can I just add a little bit of icing on the beautiful things you said, Mikey? Like when we talk about, and Ali Kadri is very good on this. It's about destroying every human experience. And when you are forced to put not just your body, but like not even your own sexual activity online forever at the age of 18, one of the most intimate, the most precious of your human experiences has been fracked and probably forever. So that is exactly what we mean. And the free people of the world, and that term also is very powerful, know that this is what they're resisting. And if you think about having daughters or whatever, you understand how vital it is for each and every one of us to stand up on the side of those who are giving the empire a bloody nose and humbling it at long last.
Mhm.
Good. Indi, did you have something?
Well, I just want to give a shout out to Rakesh. He's Sri Lankan. He's been saying hi in the comments. Komodo Rakesh.
Well, the comments, there's a lot going on in the comments. You know, I try to put a few up on the main screen. There are fewer questions than just really brilliant observations, but there have been some questions. I mean, very early in the chat, and maybe the chat has really moved on, but it was something that we maybe were planning on commenting on is, you know, what do we think happened to Netanyahu? That was in the chat. People were discussing that.
He got an extra finger is what happened to him, promised to him 3,000 years
So
ago.
I saw, like, what's his name? Marandi, the Iranian guy?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So he said, like, I don't care. Like, Zionists are all the same. And I actually feel the same way. Like, I'll be happy when Israel is gone and Palestine is free. But Netanyahu he's kind of like a centrist Israeli. He's not even like one of the crazier ones. So,
well, yeah, I mean, this is also the big concern is a parallel, you know, thinking that, well, I guess this is an interesting question. I mean, they thought that if they eliminated Iran's leadership, the supreme leader and others from the political and military leadership, that this would all be over very quickly because the system would collapse. It was hanging by a thread anyway, and you know, these Orientals, you know, they don't know how to do things. So, you know, that's the way to do it, is just take off the head, no more thinking, and they'll fall apart. You know, there is a question about, you know, whether Israel's system kind of depends perhaps on the corruption, the deals that this corrupt politician has made, and the kind of obligations he's created, and so on. And if maybe he was removed, I mean, you know, maybe there would be something different. But I think
there's a joke. There's a joke that there's going to be a leadership vacuum in America if Netanyahu is dead.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they won't know what to do. I've seen that one. Yeah, like, you know, if you take away Netanyahu, maybe the U.S.
Who's going to run the U.S.?
Who's going to run the U.S.? I know, but I mean, I think the you know, real question, you know, here is that a lot of people do focus and fixate on Netanyahu, who want to somehow recover some sense of the legitimacy of Zionism and the Zionist state. So that's a perfect response from Sayyid Mohammed Marandi, like, you know, like what's
and like Bernie Sanders or whatever, like Bernie Sanders will quite consciously say, oh, the Netanyahu government, the Netanyahu this, to lie the fact that he himself was a settler, and that this is an endemic problem with settler colonialism, not one man, not Donald Trump, not Netanyahu.
Yeah, and there's an incredible contrast, you could say, and this is something that Helia Dutari, friend, comrade, colleague, you know, had been mentioning in some of her on the field reporting, you know, on the ground. We have here.
You don't have the third option. You either have to fight with them or you have to be their slave. We choose not to be a slave, and that's why the struggle of Iranians, Palestinians, Lebanese, Syrians, we are all connected. It's the same thing. I was living in Europe. I came here the second day of war just to say that I'm here, I'm in my country, it's our land, and here will be your grave. Here will be the grave of anyone who has the plan of Big Israel. Big Israel will be Big Israel. Many people ask me, oh, you are going back to do what? And I said, it's not about doing what, it's about being there. I came here just to be, because me being here is a sense of solidarity that I'm standing with my people, and it's not like, oh, My people are being under bombardment. I'm just sitting in Europe on the sofa, on my sofa and reading the news. No, I couldn't do that.
It's
Now
it's a
that
beautiful. Oh, sorry.
Now
Beaut-
that is an interview that Helia did with somebody who, very interestingly, looks like he could be a protester and pro-Palestine, in the West, speaking English. She's got the kafia.
I think her sign said like I was a protester, but I'm here now.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
the most
She
beautiful
was a
thing,
protester.
if I may interject, is she says, people asking me, what are you going to do there? And she said, it's not about doing, it's about being. And I think, again, what we are seeing is this fight of life, which is about being against these forces of death, which are all about doing, right? So they're trying to get their AI to do everything that beings do, but it can never be. It can never do the being and just go, I'm just being, I'm just being. And I had that sense when the gates of the Tufan Al-Aqsa flood opened. I just decided I would just be. I would just be me and speak up in whatever way. And there was a sense of, this is who I am. And I don't care what, and I didn't think, what am I going to do? What can I do? I just went more into, no, I am. This is who I am. And that is what life is about. That is what being a free person of the world is about. Fret not too much about what you do. Once you are, the doing will look after itself in a very deep sense. Because doing is what you get robots to do. And what they call artificial intelligence is great for programming things that can be done automatically, but they can never be. You can only do this productively so that we can be more with our friends, be more with our passions, be more with the world around us, the environment around us. And that being only living things can do. And this is what, at the end of the day, is going to defeat all that nonsense. And this is why I'm so optimistic, because you can't destroy being. It has this way of reproducing and has been doing it for, billions of years, and will go on a few billions of years more. So I wouldn't fret too much about their ability to put an end to all of our collective and individual beings.
And what that lady is doing, it really pisses capital off, because capital doesn't want you being, it wants you paying. And you can see what's happening here is, it's fascinating because people are going back into Iran, even under bombardment, and then people are going out of Israel under less bombardment. And Nasrallah said, just look at the difference between these people. Our people crawl out of the rubble saying, we will die for this land. And then they, at the first sign of trouble, will run because they're colonizers. And I think what it has to happen is you have to break the will of the colony to hold, and those, it's starting to fracture inside. Even the rumors of Netanyahu's death, even Netanyahu going out to Germany at the beginning of it, these are not signs of a colony that's strong and internally cohesive. And the noises from inside are getting sort of like more and more freaked out. Iran is not hitting civilian targets, but they are dismantling the sort of shield of immunity that they thought they had. The Iron Dome, which is really largely metaphorical, as we can see, which gave them the sense that they could do anything to anybody and get away with it. And so that's what's being taken apart here, just this idea of impunity. And what we're in now is sort of a waiting game until the American forces are pushed out, which they are being pushed out. Their supply lines are getting more and more stretched. Their crews are getting more and more mutinous, as far as I can tell. They're like lighting the laundry room on fire, in my opinion. When the US goes, as it left in Vietnam, as it left in Afghanistan, as it leaves everywhere, as it will leave even its final and most strong Horcrux, when they leave, Israel is going to fall apart. Israel cannot exist. Like, as Nasrallah said, what is this nation if you need all these aircraft carriers and all these things to defend you? And as Nasrallah said in his resistance, always remember that yesterday or day before, all these marches are from Al-Quds Day. Al-Quds is Jerusalem Day. That is the goal of kicking the Carbon Crusaders out and taking back Jerusalem. Jerusalem, not necessarily as like a Muslim place, but as like a multi-ethnic sort of free country, which is occupied by crusaders. And it's important to remember that's the goal of this war. And since America has quite liberally eliminated any, like, the top layer of somewhat moderate leadership in Iran, if you want to call it moderate, and since even the reformists in Iran are now one fist with everybody, with all the people, I think that's the goal. And God willing, I think that's what we'll get to see sooner than we think.
Inshallah. Yeah, and the context for that interview was contrasting the fact that this woman came from Europe to be home. That's what it means to be rooted and indigenous in a land. And the contrast is, of course, the crowds actually causing riots and chaos in the Tel Aviv Ben Gurion airport when Israel suddenly cut the numbers of people who could board flights departing the Zionist entity,
But please include Thailand and Sri Lanka in your prayers right now, because people are coming here. It's problematic.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit? I think we're also seeing this great clarification and realignment. And we saw an example of it, I believe, and I'm speaking a little bit under the control of what Brother Mujama has been sharing. But in this declaration that came out of...
and share screen.
Oh, okay, go ahead then.
Because I promised in promoting the show that we would talk about this. So let's take a look. This is... a press statement that was issued in the morning for us. Anyway, I saw it in the morning, first thing, pretty much, from the Islamic Resistance Movement, Hamas, right? So this was this statement that came out that had this statement here that was a little bit of a discordant note, I think. That it said, while the movement affirms the right of the Islamic Republic of Iran to respond to this aggression by all available means in accordance with international norms and laws, it calls on its brothers in Iran not to target neighboring countries. It also calls on all countries in the region to cooperate to stop this aggression. So this created something of a firestorm, I would say, in communications and online in the resistance. I posed the question, I wonder if Yahya Sinwar would have agreed with such a statement. I mean, it's the strategic logic, as Indi was just saying, to liberate of Al-Quds, of the Al-Aqsa flood, to activate the resistance regionally in a collective struggle to decolonize West Asia and liberate Palestine, right? So then I think there was another statement that came out later that is worth looking at. And also, I ended up having some people correspond on that tweet, speculating, it's Khalid Mashal, from the political wing. I'm trying to find, unfortunately. Let's see if we can find, I think I posted also the newer statement.
So one fascinating thing about Hamas is, as much as they're portrayed as some extremists, there's this book by Paulo Coelho, and she says she likened them to the Christian Social Democrats in Germany, as in they're a centrist party. They're not so Al-Qassam is somewhat independent, but this Hamas in the media is they're not extremely extreme. But I think they have clarified that statement. I was looking for the clarification also. Right.
Here it is. Actually, no, this is the background that somebody sent me, which is actually
here's I have the kind of clarification from Al-Qassam anyway. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, absolutely.
Quds Day?
Yeah, here it is, right here.
On International Quds Day, we praise the missile strikes carried out by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, targeting the Zionist enemy entity as part of the continuous bombardment operations on the entity, using qualitative and cluster missiles, which healed the chests of our bereaved people, beautifully written, and lit up the hearts of the free people before they illuminated the sky of Tel Aviv. And then it just goes on to talk about, Quds Day and how it's a day of essentially solidarity with Palestine.
And I
Project of
think
Liberation for Palestine.
within Iran's communications also, they're clear that they're not hitting the UAE. They're hitting
Yeah.
essentially occupied soil in the UAE. So in the same sense that an embassy is technically that country's soil in some other country, they're saying like, we're not hitting you, we're hitting your occupation.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Or even the
here's my
migrant
here's my 5D chess interpretation. In the same way as Pezeshkian went, oh, we apologize if we hit anything that wasn't an imperial interest. We didn't mean to. Maybe Hamas are also playing that game, like, because we need to let the rats leave that sinking ship. The more you make, a beeline for the rats to leave, the faster the ship will sink. So in a way, because we are leftists, we have these purity tests all the time and da 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 da. But if you think more broadly, if Hamas, as Indi says, which is actually a pretty moderate movement, says, okay, we don't want any of the countries to be hit. And then they clarify, they say, yeah, but Iran has the right and ta 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 ta. It creates a space. And so that's an interpretation. Another interpretation is the whole thing, the same way as, the strategic genius of Sinwar was to go, I'm going to realign everything. There's going to be only two camps left, basically, what I call camp of life and camp of death. And that's what's going to happen. And this is what the flood is going to clarify. And it also does internal clarification inside the Palestinian resistance, inside all of us ourselves. We've clarified many things over these past 2 years. We've seen many people that we thought were maybe doing good work, and they've clarified on the other side. And we've seen other people that, have clarified on the side of the free people of the world. So that would be the way I would look at it. And I wouldn't get my personal, my knickers in a twist over what exactly is happening or is the movement shaking, because the wind of history is so strong that it will align things in exactly the way that Martyr Sinwar would happen.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think people are worried about that. I think, however, we sort of leaped to analysis, but I found somebody sent me something that was quite interesting about, what actually had happened with these two statements. So here somebody said, responding to what everybody in the comments section said, oh, this is Mashal's work. He's kind of well known for being kind of pro-Qatari, sort of co-opted. He's in the political wing. He's outside the struggle. There's a difference between the military wing and this political wing. And he in particular is identified with this kind of moderate anti-resistance, let's negotiate our way into something. And so this person was kind of responding to all of this, saying that's not how it works. Hamas isn't a fragmented student activist club where individuals freelance statements. It's a movement with a council structure where positions and statements are decided collectively. And I'll come back to the rest of what this person is saying, but they're basically trying to say, oh, it's not just one person who, kind of committed this error. This is part of the movement, and was essentially trying to affirm that the first statement was legitimate and part of the, kind of real kind of thinking of the, of the movement. But in fact, actually, I think a different component of the story is that this link here that I was showing before is actually looked at what happened in the council and alleged that this is a statement issued by the Hamas movement, signed by the president of the Leadership Council, Mohammed Darwish. Izzat al-Rishq, who manages the movement's platform, refused to publish it. And instead, Izzat, along with Khalid Mashal, drafted another statement that serves their personal interest to appease the sheikh, in other words, of Qatar, and they published it. A suspicious statement aimed at besieging Gaza and severing its relationship with its only current supporter, Iran. Note that Qatar is no longer supporting Gaza with anything today. The Qatari grant has been halted since the morning of October 7th. And then there's, like condemns them.
Yeah.
What it seems is that this is alleging that the subsequent statement that Mikey just read from, that doesn't contain this line about we shouldn't bomb, you shouldn't attack our brother friendly neighboring countries, was in fact actually the first and original statement that came from the leadership council, and that there's been clearly a lot of pressure on Hamas from these GCC countries, and there is a cadre within the political side and that leadership that is a little bit severed in some ways from the resistance base in Gaza. And frankly, this shouldn't be so surprising. It really kind of reminds us in a way of the situation that was happening in the late 80s when, late 80s, early 90s, when the PLO leadership had to evacuate from Lebanon, and went to Tunisia, and the first Intifada as a popular resistance movement on behalf of Palestinian rights emerged, and Palestinian youth were confronting occupation. But then after that, of course, that led the Tunisians, as they were called and known, to make this mistake of the Oslo, Accords. And
I would like to.
Can I just finish one?
Yeah. Go.
The last statement is that I think the thing that we should do is we should follow the resistance, okay? Not the politicians in Qatar, not anybody making deals, anybody who wants to try and solve this in the back room is really, being misled from the realities of what Zionism is, okay? So the people who really understand it are the people who are waging the struggle to liberate, which is why exactly we know Jolani Shara making a deal to attack, the resistance in southern Lebanon. If, in the course of that's something that's also come out recently. Again, this is clarifying. Who do you stand with? You stand with the resistance. Okay.
So I was a little bit uneasy, and I will try and explain why. I'm always mindful of what is our role, what is it that we do, and questions about, was there a dissension in the movement? How did it manifest? Are questions for our history show. They're questions for, as you quite rightly looked back at the situation in Lebanon, at the Oslo process and all the rest of it. I don't call it the peace process, call it the capitulation process. But when battle is joined, I feel uneasy when we start going, trying to go inside potential dissensions inside the movement. I think what is absolutely precious and that we could say is, look, there was this statement, it was a little bit confusing, but then clarification was issued by the ambassador in Iran, by Mujamma sent us the whole statement. It's very long, and my reading voice is not that good. I won't read it to you, but it's been clarified. And as you rightly say, and this is the lesson, let's get our news from the resistance. The people who are actually fighting are the sources of reliable information when battle is joined. But I hope you understand what I'm trying to say is, I don't think it's our place to go and go, yeah, but there's this faction and there's that faction and there's that faction. As far as I'm concerned, I support the whole of the armed Palestinian resistance. If it has dissension, it's human. But yeah.
Well, that's the point, Benji, is that statement is being revealed as not coming from the armed Palestinian resistance.
Exactly
so that's
right.
The whole point.
But my point is not going to the details of the potential dispute. Just it's a positional point, and I don't know if I've been able to make it clearly. And I certainly wasn't trying to criticize anybody. It's more like, okay, I don't see our role as going into the details at this particular point in time, but I'll just leave it there. Hopefully,
Okay, I'm
what
sorry
useful
I
people
shared
will
the
do.
details. The point of the details was to say, don't be worried and don't be confused.
Exactly. That is true. That
And
is
with the resistance. And that's why most of the people didn't take it seriously, you know? Only people who are going to get themselves confused by, oh, but the Syrian revolution, but shouldn't we, you know, be happy for that? You know, that's for, you know, that's how they try and confuse us and divide us. And the point was that the clarification came right away that there are some people who are ready to exploit these situations. So don't pay attention to them. Stand with the resistance. Al-Qassam already had made a couple of weeks ago an important statement. So if this one, you know, if your radar is like, why are they saying, you know, that Iran shouldn't be attacking the neighboring, you should be a little suspicious, because that's not something that the resistance is ever going to say.
That's true.
Yes.
And if you
Amen.
look at historical resistance statements, they usually don't comment, even when those things are materially against them, that they don't comment against like other parts of the resistance.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so Leah in the chat pointed out something that I wanted to make a connection to as well, is these types of conversations happen often when, you know, we're kind of like impotent spectators on the sidelines who don't, you know, get to participate in these insider conversations. I've been very frustrated with the way that a lot of the left has reacted to the necessary concessions, including public statements that Delcy Rodriguez has made in the wake of Maduro and Celia getting kidnapped by the U.S. You know, I mean, Maduro is the duly elected leader of Venezuela, in solitary confinement in New York City, and there is still a gun to the head, not just of Delcy and all of the top leadership, a gun to the head of the entire nation of Venezuela. And every post that you know, acting president Rodriguez makes is in that context, right? And in the context also of a completely deteriorated oil extraction infrastructure, decades of well, you know, well over a decade of debilitating genocidal sanctions, and an economy that is largely dependent on its oil industry, right? So like a lot of the posts that she's made publicly have been, you know, torn to shreds. There was a really shitty post that I think one of like a government minister made that was taken down. But at the same time, you know, and this was when she made a comment after talking to some, like, you know, Qatari petroleum, you know, administrators about, you know, having, you know, a good relationship, and talking very in broad generalities about wanting the conflict to end, right? Which it sucks. It's a shitty statement, right? But you have to view it in the context of the existential crisis that Venezuela is enduring, and this is part of a very, you know, strategic tactical retreat. It is not the death of Chavismo. It is not a complete suspension of the Bolivarian revolution. It is what they have to do to survive, you know, and it's not pretty. It's not good. It doesn't help the international solidarity that the country has built with Iran over the years. But it's also, I think, temporary. I think they're trying to wait out Trump's spiral into oblivion. And I think also that in that case as well, we have to stop thinking of in the terms of great man of history, or great woman in this case of history, right? It's not all about just the people at the top, particularly in the case of Venezuela, right? There are literally millions of people in the volunteer militia, the colectivos. There's well over 3 million communards in a country of 30 million people, right? So like, that's a lot of people in these amazing communes that are doing incredible things under incredibly dire conditions. And, you know, they recently went out into the streets in protest and in solidarity with their Iranian brothers and sisters a world away, right? So the Bolivarian Revolution is still alive from the ground up, you know, and I think we always, especially, you know, when in our online conduct, I think we have to slow down our Twitter fingers and be slower to react to situations, one that we have very little control over, but also, like Benji, you know, reiterated, like, what is demanded of us right now? What is the most important thing for us to be talking about? To is it okay for us to be fixated and spend a whole day online talking about, you know, the last shitty thing that Zoran Mamdani did, right? Is that what we want people's feeds who are actually trying to get educated and updated about the current situation of the Ramadan war? Is that what they need to be hearing right now? I don't think so, right? So yeah, I think also, yeah, just prioritizing what we care about and what we feel other people should care about in order to actually get them activated, to plug them into movement, to plug them into international solidarity, to plug them into community organizing where they live.
Yeah, and I agree that, like, this war isn't being fought with sort of PDFs and UN resolutions. I think even with the UN resolution, people are like, oh, China and Russia are like not on everybody's side. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, that doesn't matter. And, like,
but it's being fought by PDFs.
Yeah.
And against PDFs also.
Right, and like the stuff that's I think what we're seeing is like there's like a sort of information war where it's almost pure information from the West, and then like Iran, China, everybody else, their information war isn't that strong, but they're just doing stuff on the ground. Like what Nasrallah says is like red blood can obliterate red lines, and I think that's what's happening.
The Doug agrees.
Oh.
Well, I think we're getting sort of close. Well, we just passed the sort of 2-hour mark. There's always more to talk about, but I think, you know, it's good to have maybe a final round of summing up since our last Iran versus the Epstein Empire episode 5. You see what, you know, kind of the key points. I thought we would end up talking maybe more about, and we took the title from, you know, humbling the front of arrogance. We took the title from a phrase, or really it was Benji's, you know, excellent suggestion, taking the title from the new supreme leader, Mujtaba Khamenei's recent communication. But as is the case, every day it seems that there's so many new developments taking place that it seems like that statement that he made is, you know, somehow deep in the past. I mean, it was only yesterday, I think, really. So, but I don't know, whatever kind of key point or key development that elucidates our understanding of events and our obligations. Benji again was correct to point out that like our role is different. So it's not about necessarily figuring all these things out, but only to the extent that it enables you to have a clear vision of, you know, what you need to focus on, right? Mm-hmm. And not to get confused with the way in which some of these supposed and potential differences can be exploited in the information war to weaken the movement and to weaken, you know, support for the resistance. But, you know, I'm wondering if, you know, people have any top of the line things we didn't talk about that we really should, before we close the stream, you know, make mention of.
Well, I would suggest a couple of things, not that we didn't mention them, but one is, you know, anchor yourself in the fact that this is life standing up to death. And as you do that, life is imperfect. Life is messy. Life is about stumbling before falling, before you know how to walk. So as we stand on the side of life, inspired by life, for life and against death, we should not start looking for all the little imperfections, because life is imperfect. The only perfect thing in the world is death, but it's not that interesting, at least not attractive to me. So that's, you know, and we Westoids, especially leftists and anti-imperialists, it's like our intellectual DNA has been branded by a sense of doom and defeatism, and we spend all our lives, all our reasoning powers trying to work out how defeat is going to be snatched from the jaws of victory. And even if it looks like a victory, there must be something toxic inside of it. And did you see Hamas did that, and this guy did this, and maybe it's the end of the world as we know it. But actually, brothers and sisters, I feel fine because I'm on the side of life. I'll say just one thing about the Mamdani thing. Don't concern yourself at all about it, except for watching sisters Susan Abul Hawa's video response. It's 20 minutes. It will bring tears to your eyes. It will make the Palestinian people of Gaza come to life in the way that Brother David is able to make the people of Iran come to life through the screen. So, don't care about Zayoran and his pro-Syrian good lady wife or whatever, but Susan Habulawa has been thrown under the bus, and she has responded in the most dignified way to that attempt at humiliation of the Zionists. And this is an essential part of our fight, brothers and sisters. So in that respect, please go and watch video response.
Yeah, on that point, I'd say just the Mamdani thing. Every condemnation from within the empire, which Mamdani is a reading recommendation. And I think this is a good chance for people to get introduced to Susan, I forget her name, Abdul Hawa.
Hawa.
It's Abdul Hawa. So that's a very good way to get introduced to her work. If they condemn something, generally it's actually a very good book club. Is following the Western media and who they're condemning. And
she's on Resistance is Fertile. We had a great conversation with her. Let me plug this. On Resistance is Fertile. Go and watch it.
And if you're following the war in general, I just invite you to I have a post out now called 3 Basic Facts. But if there's just 3 basic facts about war. One is that defense is generally stronger than offense, and Iran is waging a defensive war from its own land. The other point is that the high ground is superior to the low ground and has been ever since we were throwing rocks and sticks at each other. And if you look at a topographical map of the region, Iran is on the high ground throwing highly sophisticated rocks and sticks down to a plain where the eyes and ears of empire have been systematically blinded, and they're being pushed out of that plain. And then the third point is that infantry, no matter what cavalry and artillery you have, wars are still won by infantry. And in this war, unlike the Iraq War, unlike the Vietnam War, unlike the Afghanistan War, the empire has not been able to land a single infantry and have them not be captured. I think maybe there's a few incursions, but they are not able to set a foot on Iran. I invite you to look at the topographical map again, whereas the empire has people in the north of Palestine through Hezbollah and in the south through Al-Qassam. And I think the real Quds Day is coming soon, and don't lose sight of these basic facts, which the idiots within empire, so Trump, who has no idea about basic facts in general and lives in a media world, they have lost sight of that. And if you read sort of On War by Clausewitz, who himself is a racist, but that's also enlightening. But he talks about how in these situations, when you're on defense and when you have these advantages, time and terrain are on the side of the defender, and time and terrain are on the side of Iran and the axis of resistance.
Mikey, do you have any concluding thoughts to emphasize?
That to America.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
I want to repeat something from Mikey then. So Mikey said, "In language there is life, in language there is death," and I think that's a very good quote. Like we're at a point of great historical change, and like the language is changing. So I think it's a fascinating time historically.
Yeah.
Well, I did want, I said that I would come back to this statement. Maybe it's beating a dead horse here, but there is a methodological point that comes out of it that I think is very important. So, this person tried basically to explain whatever was the apparent division between these two competing cases, and to try, statements from Hamas, and to try and draw some kind of explanation or how to understand these differences between the Gaza-based resistance and the political wing. And he said basically that, well, the military leadership. They're coming out of this very Salafist, Ibn Taymiyyah-centric mosque environments and religious study circles. They're very, kind of more fundamentalist in some ways, is what he's saying, more conservative, stricter, etc. And, Mashal and the political leadership, they're more of a moderate wing, and i.e. they're also connected with the Muslim Brotherhood, which we know Qatar is a big supporter and sponsor of, and trying to kind of rehabilitate that kind of trend. The problem here is not only is that wrong, which already a big problem, but even the gesture and the effort to try and explain these, very key political positions and situations through the frame, of theological affinities gets it completely backwards and obscures the political kind of conditions and interests that are at stake. And what I wanted to conclude with is something that a dear friend and comrade, Lara Shihai, sent me based on some comments I made on the last Tanki Group therapy when talking about Shiism, the martyrdom of Imam Hussein and the role and importance of that, and thinking through the response and the reaction that people had, of greater revolutionary commitment and fervor in Iran and in the axis of resistance. It was basically by thinking a little bit about the kind of way in which sectarianism has been exploited in such a deadly and dangerous way. She sent me this video that really summed up how I think we need to think about it. And I posted in the tweet that there are these only two schools. And I wanted to show this video as a way maybe to conclude today's stream, if it'll work. Let's see.
مصيبة والله بعض العرب. قلت له يا أخي هذه قضية
Sorry, like
50-60 سنة. هسه بعد ما عندنا شيعة وسنة. عندنا مدرستين، مقاومة وانبطاح. الله. المقاومة فيها السني والشيعي والكردي والعربي والمسيحي واللاديني وكل شيء، وكذلك الانبطاح فيها الشيعي والسني قلت له عندنا مدرستين، انتهى موضوع شيعة وسنة. فسكت. قلت له هذه قضية قديمة بابا، يا الآن مدرستين عندنا. الحقيقة كل الأفكار وكل التيارات وكل المذاهب موجودة في المدرستين. إما أنت ذليل للصهاينة والأمريكان بكل مذاهبك، لو أنت شامخ وقوة وصاحب كرامة والشرف، كل الأديان فيها. صحيح. الحمد لله.
Okay, so
Who is that?
I just wanted to say this. I have no idea who this is. He's obviously Iraqi from the accent, but he was telling a story in this interview on this program that he had gone to Egypt and he was being detained and questioned by the authorities at the airport and passport control, security, and so on. They said, "Oh, are you Shia?" And so he reacted and responded with this response and explanation. And that's what I want to say to the brother who, trying to be, helpful, perhaps. I don't know any motivations, but trying to explain, differences that might happen in the resistance, community, that there really is no difference that's meaningful within the Sunni community, within the Shi'i community, within the people who are not religious, among Christians, anywhere, both in the Middle East and I would say now in the world. This has now become a globalized situation and condition. There are two madhabs, two schools, two orientations. One is resistance to achieve sovereignty, humanity, human development, what Benji calls the camp of life. There's that one, and there's subservience, and there's humiliation to the Epstein Empire, to degradation, to inhumanity, to all the things Mikey was talking about and Benji and Indi talked about in terms of artificial life and this tech, kind of world that they're trying to create.
And the cult of death, a cult of actual death.
Yes, exactly. The death, involved in it. So let's take this as a reminder and dedicate ourselves and commit ourselves to the school, the madhab, the madrasa, the orientation, the camp of resistance. And so I wish you all peace with justice and solidarity. And of course, free Palestine and death to the U.S. empire. Mikey's added a bit there.
And victory to the free people of the world. Swift victory.
Swift.
Free people of
Let's
the
hope
world.
so, inshallah. All right, everyone. It's great to have been with you.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.